All right. Good evening, Dr. Wilder, my fellow English 433 students. My name is Benjamin, and the article that I was assigned for Willa Cather's Professor's House was titled Canonical Relations, Willa Cather, America, and the Professor's House. It was featured in Texas Studies of Literature and Language, Volume 47, and it was by Anna Wilson, who is an assistant professor of English at Harvard University. She got her PhD from medieval studies from the University of Toronto in 2015, and she wrote her dissertation on fan fiction and medieval literature. So a little bit of deviation talking about Willa Cather and American literature, but she also published articles in Transformative Works and Cultures and Exemplaria. So she has done various literature and English magazines. Harvard University professor, so I'm inclined to believe that she has the ethos to discuss this subject with us. So she begins her article by talking about kind of the evolution of criticism when it comes to Willa Cather and where she stands in the canon of American literature. And as she talks about it, she makes a point that what we think of Willa Cather as far as compared to other authors of the time has varied as the century has gone on. She begins by quoting James Schroeder from an introduction in Recent Views, Willa Cather and Her Critics, which was published in 1967. And she uses two quotes from him, and one is that Willa Cather is a small critical backwater. So I think what he's saying here is that while she's very important in where she stands, she's not a very explored author in compared to others. So she goes on to say that the debate about Willa Cather and where she stands in the canon of American literature kind of changed in the 1970s. I think she wants to say that in the 1970s that there was a wave of feminist critique that kind of put her on the same level of her male counterparts, and that Willa Cather's the appreciation of her work really blossomed when that criticism came to prominence in the 1970s. But she does admit that some critics throughout the century have said that she's kind of not really important, I would say. She quotes Granville Hicks as saying in The Case Against Willa Cather, an article, that she is largely, her refusal to examine life as it is picked up is kind of a turning back on the modern world. So he's saying that Willa Cather is kind of like a contrarian, I believe, and that she's not really accepting American life as it was depicted, or that it actually was in the 1920s when she was writing. And you kind of get that. Her characters, Professor St. Peter and Tom Outland, you see them regressing back into nature and kind of shunning their abilities and their talents a little bit. So I get that criticism that she's kind of going against societal and cultural progress, and she's holding on to nature and intellect at the expense of industry. And I see that in her work and how Professor St. Peter views life, the life that he's living in. So I get that. And like I said, in the 1970s, with the feminist movement, the criticism of her work really changed a lot as well. So that's kind of like the back and forth of the criticism of her. It's definitely kind of like fluctuated. But her argument in this, I guess her hypothesis in this article, is that I'll read it. She fails to exemplify the vicissitudes of literary fortune, While critical contests over canonical position are by definition about where an author stands in relation to others, the question of place has notably caused difficulty in Cather's case. I think he's saying that she doesn't really fit into the mold of what was going on at the time. And I think that she also says, and I feel like this is part of her hypothesis in the article as well, that the novel avoids any such possibilities, choosing instead to leave the alternatives it seems to purpose as inert lyric moments that are cordoned off from history. So what she's saying is that Willa Cather is her work is kind of standalone, that there's these moments with characters that are really to be appreciated just as those moments in that time with those characters, and they're not really representative of the literature and the societal world at large, and that she's kind of standalone in that, and that's why maybe she hasn't been as appreciated as representing the culture that she lived in. So I want to talk to you about some textual evidence that she uses for that. So she talks about how with her characters, especially Tom, he's taken a stance against modernism in society, as we seen in our discussion posts, and that his character represents going back to nature and intellect, and he kind of goes against capitalism and society. We see him leaving DC out of disgust and going and praising this lost city, this mesa of past civilization. And we see him, it's more of an escape to the past, but for him it's more personal. And as much as these characters want to live in the past and dwell in the past and obsess about it, you see also in her novel that there's really no stopping the march of progress. And it's kind of like this dichotomy. You got these characters that want to stay there, and then society that's moving on. So also she talks about movement, the narrative of movement, she says in the article. And she talks about the opening line in the novel, which I thought was interesting. It's called, it was that the moving was done and over. And Wilson here is saying that this kind of means like the characters, especially St. Peter, is done moving, is over this progress that's being made in society. So she's saying that the characters in and of themselves are stuck and they don't want to move forward, but her novels make it clear that regardless of what her characters want to do, society is going to push forward anyways. So there's a really good quote that that near the end of the article that I'll quote for you, and I think it really sums up what she was saying, and that her hypothesis that Willa Cather stands apart because her characters stand apart from the society in which they lived in. It's talking about the mesa that Tom Outland goes to, and this is really good that I thought sums it up. It says, if circulation and movement on and around the mesa replicate the difficulties of circulation of money and commodities in the world that the professor inhabits, the happiness that Tom can find after all else fails is non-circulatory. The possession of the mesa in solitary stillness. The remaining difference between the two worlds then lies in the availability of such moment of lyricfulness. This possession is the result of an aesthetic process. Something happened to me that made it possible for me to coordinate and simplify. So she's quoting that from the novel, and she's saying that whatever experience they have of returning to nature is just for themselves, and that society is going to move on. We see society benefiting from Tom Outland's discoveries while he had died in the war. The professor is still stuck in the past and wants to get back to nature. You see him going swimming at the lake, trying to recapture scenes from his childhood. And at the same time, he's living in a society that's moving on with industry and commercialism. So that's what I think she's saying overall. Just to tie it all together, I think that this article brings to light that Cather's place in the literary canon of this time period is definitely enshrined, that she's saying that modern society and modernism couldn't be avoided, but that characters themselves and the ones that she writes about, it's more of a personal level, And I think for her, for me, and also for me, like reading her writing was definitely an escape from the modern world. So I think that that's what she's trying to say, that literature is actually the place in and of itself where, like Tom Allen or Professor St. Peter, it was kind of like our mezza or our writing room that we can escape to. And I think that's something that we shouldn't lose about literature of any time frame, especially this one of so much upheaval that we're covering this semester. I think that literature in and of itself doesn't have to like analyze society or reflect society, but can be a nice escape from that society. And we see that in Ernest Hemingway as well. And Nick, when Nick goes to the Big Two-Hearted River, for instance, I think literature can provide that escape for readers then and now. So I think that's what this article is trying to say, and that Willa Cather really epitomizes that escape. And that's why some of her critics say that she wasn't representative of the time period, and we can't really get a sense of it from her characters. So that's what I got from this article and from my reading of Willa Cather's The Professor's House. Thank you for watching. I hope you all have a great weekend, and I hope you enjoy your reading. Thank you.